To discuss the implications of The Voice here in Australia, please welcome back to the stage Warren Mundine and Jacinta Price, who will also be joined by Anthony Dillon.
I was almost waiting for Warren to start doing some dance moves across that stage.
You haven't seen me do the shake a leg, mate. It's great. It's really good. Anthony, where are you? Coming?
Here. Guys, thanks for opening for me. You're a great support act.
And I got to say that opening speech by you, Jacinta, was the second best speech I've ever heard. But modesty will not allow me to tell you what the best was.
Can I just say that I remember that evening when you got roped into being the chairman of CPAC, and I felt like I got off scot-free that night, because I know really Andrew that wanted me to be the chair of CPAC. But what happened was we were supposedly drinking vodka and soda, and I was buying rounds. But I was saying to the barman, "Can you just hold the vodka on one of those, please?" So while the real vodka and sodas were going to Warren and Andrew and Elizabeth, I was rehydrating, and I managed to avoid getting roped into that role.
The B team, okay, got it.
Chairman of CPAC, everyone.
Or, as we've become known as, the good, the bad, and the cuddly. And I think it's obvious who's who.
Yeah, you're the cuddly one.
Looking at us on stage and looking at that opening ceremony, and congratulations to that dance group and the singers and everything, fantastic. This is the changes that we want to have. But it's obvious from looking at us that CPAC is a racist organisation and we deserve to be condemned. Yeah. But now we're going to have get into some more serious stuff in regard to The Voice. We've heard your strong words. Anthony, what do you think?
Look, when I was, this is the latest incarnation of The Voice. There's always been that sort of drive for the separate Indigenous expert, either individual or body. And I reflect back on my time when I was a public servant in Queensland. 25 years ago, I was writing about, when I was working in the health department, and I saw all these policies for Aboriginal health saying, we've got to have separate services for Aboriginal people, only Aboriginal people can talk about Aboriginal people, only Aboriginal people can provide services for Aboriginal people because they're the experts. And so all I'm seeing today is that sort of same spirit coming again, which says, Aboriginal people are separate to non-Aboriginal people. And, we are one, we have the same fundamental needs. And, I'm not opposed to services that may specialise in problems or conditions affecting Aboriginal people more. But once you start fiddling with the Constitution and that sort of thing, and once you make this assumption that Aboriginal people all think alike, act alike, you've got real problems. And we know that, Aboriginal people are as diverse as non-Aboriginal people. There's a lot of variation within the Indigenous camp. So to think you can have a voice or a few voices, is not a good idea.
And you're right about us being not all the same. You can tell from just looking at us how dapper some of us are, and I'm not going to mention names. Okay.
Dapper meaning more integrated or assimilated. I still don't wear a tie. You're the one who's integrated.
Yeah, obvious. That's obvious.
Colonised. He's far more.
Colonised. Yes. The things I find really weird, because it may surprise you that I was, I'm going to give away my age now. I was born in 1956, I grew up in that first part of my life under the New South Wales Aboriginal Protection Act. These were segregation laws, kept us apart, and really we were, under the Aboriginal Welfare Board, and they could walk into your house and do anything, and make sure that we cleaned the place and all that type of stuff. And one of my greatest joys in life, I would have been about 8. I think I was about 8 at the time. And this Aboriginal welfare officer turned up to check out the house, and my mother got a broom and whacked him and chased him out of the house. And then I thought, that's freedom. We need we need more of that freedom. And so, but we grew up on all this stuff, and then I just really feel weird. And you mentioned it in your speech about the culturally unsafe, which I don't have a clue what that is. And you got these, they wouldn't have the minute silence at the AFL women's game because these big burly players who play one of the toughest games in the world were going to, as soon as they heard silence for 60 seconds, they were all going to fall on the floor in a fetal position and start crying. To me, the voice is a solution looking for a problem. At a time, and I'll give you an example. When I was a young bloke, Charles Perkins and John Moriarty come around. This is the old Freedom Ride days. And I was about 6 at the time, and before Charles passed away, I always remind you of that. I was only 6 when you were at university. They come to our town, and my parents and all the people in the town were saying, wow, these 2 Aboriginal people are coming, and they've been to university. And we go, wow, that's really incredible. Didn't have a clue what university was, but it was very impressive. It sounded really great. And they were the first. Now, here we are in 2022. We've got 700 doctors. We've got professors of medicines, professors of surgery. We've got, I don't know if this improves civilization, but we've got lawyers, and we've got judges and magistrates and that, and we've got engineers, and we've got thousands of Aboriginal people who are working in the mining industry. But if you listen to the left, you think that we all hate the industry. And we've got people who are moving on and doing all these great things, school teachers, etc. When I was chairman to the Prime Minister's Advisory Council for Tony Abbott, if you're out there, Tony, good day, and to Malcolm, no, you're not out here, I know, and is that how were we going to get economic prosperity, economic opportunities for Aboriginal people? Of course, you can get every Aboriginal person a counsellor and a job helper and all that type of stuff, but until you get people to say, I want a job, it ain't going to happen. And that's what we got to start doing. So we set up this thing called the Indigenous Procurement Policy, and the idea was, how do we set up businesses? Because we were putting the cart before the horse. We was always talking about employing Aboriginals, but we all know to employ anyone, you have to have a profitable, commercial, private business that hires people and gives them jobs. And so we come up with this policy, and it didn't cost the government hardly anything. It started out in 2015, the 1st of July 2015, at $7.6 million. As of 2020, it was over $1 billion. So in 5 years. Today, I was checking the website of the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs, and it's now has a spin-on effect of $6.7 billion to Indigenous businesses who are employing 70% of their staff are Indigenous. This is the change that's going to make everything for everyone. There's only one thing that really, really makes a difference in people's life, and that is the ability to earn a wage, to buy a house, to get your kids educated, to get a job, and to run a business, having the opportunity to run a business. And through that process, this is what is going to make Australia a better and a greater place, not some voice to Parliament. I'll let you have a say now.
I was waiting.
I was hoping to run out of time, I think.
I just don't know where to start in terms of why this is such a terrible, terrible, terrible idea to dramatically change our constitution to favour one race of Australians over the rest. Having grown up in Alice Springs with an Aboriginal mother and a white Australian father, to me, we're all just human. We're all just human. This divisiveness crept in later in my adult life, and the more that I sort of have been involved with the rest of the country, probably, safe to say that Alice Springs was probably a little, a bit of a utopia in that regard, in the fact that everybody got on with everybody. Many people were in the same boat as myself, where they had an Aboriginal parent and a white Australian parent, and I think of the demise of some of our most vulnerable, which are those who still who live in very remote regional parts of this country, whose first language is not English, who still live pretty much governed by customary law. They are our most marginalised, and they don't have the same sort of access and opportunities as in people of Indigenous heritage in this country, those who are absolutely and utterly fighting for changing our constitution and enshrining a voice. And they are also the same people who haven't a single clue as to what it all, in fact, means. Our society does not do them any favours, because the romanticism around Aboriginal culture and all things wonderful, and the fact you cannot question Indigenous people, because I don't know if you realise this, but we're spiritual beings that hover above the earth. Our feet don't even touch the ground. But
The pronoun is Your Majesty.
Absolutely. I know someone who calls him that on a regular basis. The cheeky Scotsman. I don't know if you know, but we're known as the King and Queen of Coconut Island.
Actually, I think we should get it tomorrow and put it up on the screen. It's hilarious. They got a photo of Prince William and Princess Kate now, because she's the Princess of Wales, and they took the heads off and put our heads on, and then they had at the top, King and Queen of Coconut Island, you know. I look pretty good in that photo, but, you know, having Williams's body is great.
So that really is his pronoun. You know, I've fought my way through to the Senate floor on the basis of being able to fight on behalf of those who are my family members, who are amongst some of the most marginalised individuals in this country. And what I want for them is the same opportunities that those people who need cultural safe spaces, who are leading, you know, have all the high-paying positions on Aboriginal organisations, who feel threatened by the presence of, you know, more and more feeling threatened by the presence of white Australians in this country that claim victimhood constantly. All I want for my people is the same opportunities that they have, which is an education, a job, access to services, but an understanding that in fact you have the capability of being able to grasp those things, and not because of, you know, nothing's there to stop you. The colour of your skin is not something that impedes you. It's being told constantly that you're a victim. It's being told that somebody else is responsible for your life, and you're not responsible for your own life because you are a victim. It's understanding that you have the right to say no to the cultural practices that actually impede you, the cultural practices that deny you your human rights. And I think it is important. There is an argument, it is really important that we do as Australians have to understand more about Aboriginal culture, particularly traditional Aboriginal culture, for the sake of those that live it. Because and I've been called all sorts of names because I highlight those elements certainly of the traditional culture that governs over my family, that is detrimental to our people, like marrying, promising a young girl to be married off to an older man. My mother was promised to become a second wife from a young age. She was a rebel. She rebelled against her own culture. And for Aboriginal Australians in those positions, they are not encouraged to rebel. They're not encouraged to stand up and understand one's own worth, or encouraged to say no. And that same sense of being discouraged is what is now being used across Australia to push people toward a yes vote. If you don't vote yes for this constitutional change, you will be labelled. You'll be called a name. It won't be true. It won't be true. It's not fact. It's not based on fact. But that same sentiment is what is being used. The same sentiment that's kept a lot of those marginalised people down is what is being used, is weaponised against the rest of Australia to continue to toe the line toward this woke nonsense. And I can't think of anything more inhumane than that in our nation, and there's no place for it. And that's why I cannot support this idea of a voice. If my mother can be born under a tree, in the bush, if she can grow up in a humpy, in a traditional makeshift accommodation, and if she can speak her first language, and if she can overcome DV, if she can overcome all that adversity as a Warlpiri woman in this country with no other ancestry, just Warlpiri, if she can do that and become a Minister of the Crown in the Northern Territory government, anyone can do anything in this country, and she didn't need a bloody voice to do that.
Look, we've heard the term victimhood mentioned, and we hear it all the time where Aboriginal affairs is mentioned. And for all Aboriginal people, and non-Aboriginal people for that matter, you're never ever victims of the past, but only ever victims of your view of the past, as indeed thousands of Aussies have proven. Now, with regard to the voice, I believe it's in the next financial year they're talking about the referendum. Until then, there's plenty of time for the architects of the voice to come forth and give their voice and explain to the country how they've done so well without a treaty, without the voice, without changing the constitution. And I think you'll find they've done well either because they were born into good circumstances like Jacinta and I, or they've escaped or exited bad circumstances similar to Warren and my father. And I like to think, here in Australia, if for Indigenous people, if you are in bad circumstances, there is always another Aussie close by who will gladly help you get out of those circumstances. Indeed, again, as many thousands already have. So for the architects of the voice, please, you've got plenty of time. Tell the nation about how you've done so well. Tell them the factors that have allowed you to rise to the position where you have.
The formula exists. It exists.
It does. We'll finish off now, but I just wanted to say the last word because I got the mic.
Can't help yourself.
Yeah. You can see why we've, at the time, this is why Jacinta is so important, and Karen Little, Senator Karen Little from South Australia, so to have those two Indigenous, Aboriginal women in that parliament, because otherwise we'd be just steamrolled and beaten up. I remember sitting in the gallery listening to all the conversations and that. And Jacinta, and I put it on Twitter and got beaten up. And I said, this is the speech I've been waiting all my life for. This is the speech I've been waiting all my life for, you know. My parents, you know, like Jacinta's parents, they lived in Humpies, and my grandparents were the same. And they always said, do not become a victim. Take responsibility for your experiences and outcomes. Life will throw, you know, left hooks at you and that, and you'll get knocked down, but get up and keep going. And this is what the Australian spirit is. This is what the liberal democracy and the freedoms spirit is, and we need to defend them, and we need to fight from them. I was on Twitter arguing with a bloke. He was British, black British, but he's living in Australia now because he's a football player, soccer player. And he was telling me how oppressed I was. He said, Warren, you are oppressed because of your skin colour. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I live on the North Shore of Sydney, overlooking Sydney
Full stop,
Harbour.
that's it.
And I own 2 businesses, and I sit on the boards of commercial companies in London and Australia. And I'm thinking, God, wait till they stop oppressing me. I'm going to kill everything. I'm just going to rip it up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jacinta, and thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.